Hey yo, I I just thought I'd make a video because I've been asked this actually by a decent amount of people, whether in YouTube land or outside of that, just in or and around RTK in general. Just not a lot of people these days, it seems, play Skaven, and sometimes when they want to learn it, they'll ask me what I do. So I thought I'd just make a video and help some people out if they want to know how to play Skaven. Um, Before I get started, just to preempt some of the comments and stuff, these are my opinions. This is how I play Skaven. This is how I enjoy playing Skaven. They work pretty well for me. And if you disagree, if you want to play them a different way, good. That's fine. Good for you. I just thought I'd throw my opinions out there. So we're just gonna do a quick rundown of generally what tools you have in your toolkit. So Skaven in general, obviously a low leadership and summon faction, but other than that, I would actually compare them very heavily to Empire in their strengths. And by that I just mean I strongly believe Skaven can fight and win against any faction in the game. Some are harder than others, obviously, but Skaven have their strength comes in their tools, right? They have monsters, they have good artillery, they have good weapons teams, they have knight runners, which are underutilized but effectively, or archers. They're kind of B tier at everything, if that makes sense. So they always have a card to play. So that's what I think about their strength in general. Is a lot of people tunnel in on their artillery or the poison wind functions, but they have some other good things going for them. So for your lord choice, when to take each lord and why. Warlord, never. Dretch, never. Queek has one good matchup, and it's versus dwarves, but the unfortunate thing for him is that Snitch is better in that same matchup. And it's also one of the Skaven's best matchups, so you don't even need him. So Queek, honestly, I love him, but never. And the Warlock Master is just Claw, but worse. So also no reason to ever take him, honestly. So that leaves us with the others, and they actually do have a place. Master Assassin is interesting, and I do sometimes enjoy him. Looming Dread is underutilized in my opinion. Minus 24 melee defense and about 50% speed from a lord is very nice. Slippery's good. Rival High Talisman's good. He's just a little bit of a buffed up assassin. Now, one problem I run into with him is that his shuriken that he throws is extremely temperamental. Some games he just really won't throw it, even if he's on fire at will. And perfectly in range of stuff, he just won't throw. I don't know why, but user beware. Otherwise, he's pretty fine. He's inoffensive. Snitch we'll get back to. We're going to skip him for a second, you'll see why. Gracier of Plague and Ruin. Always on their bell. Off their bell, they lose 80 armor, and important to this is they lose 30 leadership off of the bell. That is the big kicker. You always want them on the bell for that leadership. And they have a very nice leadership ability, Unholy Clamor, when on the bell. You really want that. If you're ever using a Plague Grey Seer, you will either want Vermintide and Pestilent Breath, or Vermintide and Dreaded 13th. Those are really the only two spell combos you'll ever need. The Dreaded 13th is a damage spell with a summon attached to it. It is not a summon spell with damage attached to it. In that, I mean, you cast it for the damage, you don't cast it for the Storm Vermin with halberds. They're pretty mediocre, but the explosion that comes with them is extremely nice. So treat it as such. Potence of Verminous Doom, minus 4 leadership, always good. It's only 63 gold. And the Warpstone Scroll is also almost always good if you're ever going to deal with like a Manticore or something. Gracier of Ruin, you will take him mostly in matchups where Manticores are going to get summoned on you. And in that case, you just take either the Dreaded 13th and Howling Warp Gale, or Howling Warp Gale and Scorch. Howling Warp Gale, it's critical. If they have flyers, you need it. And if you don't need it, it's 69 gold. So it's just worth taking in case you need it in matchups with Manticore summons. Again, you can take the Warpstone Scroll and Potence of Verminous Doom. Claw. You would take him when you need a Doom Wheel, which is not very often, so probably don't take him. Now, he's not useless, he's just not ideal. If you do take him on his Doom Wheel. Get rid of Brass Orb. I see some people take it, and it's nifty looking, but it doesn't do any damage, honestly. Like, just doesn't do anything, and it's 100 gold. Also take off Unlimited Power, because it's kind of like Arcane Conduit, but also the miscast chance just isn't worth it on a faction without healing, in my opinion. Again, on him, you will want Howling Warp Gale in any faction that could possibly have flying because it's 72 gold for the cost. And then usually take Scorch. It's a nice wind spell, it's fine. Storm Demon is tricky. It can do a lot of damage to lords on chariots or on horses, but if they have, you know, a massive health pool like a dragon, it's probably not worth it, and it can miss, so it's a little janky. But I don't take Iked in a lot of matchups, you'd mostly meme. Skrulk is safe. He's safe. His -5 melee attack aura is really nice. Again, if you're going with him, you're going to either want Vermintide or Pestilent Breath, or Vermintide and Pestilent Birth. Now, this is tricky. Since the mana cost increase, it is a 224 gold spell. So if you're summoning these Plague Monks, they got to get a lot of work done. And if you're just going to summon them, run them at archers, and the archers are going to run away, that's not worth it. So there's few matchups in which this is helpful, but it can be helpful. It's only really helpful in matchups where you're actually trying to win the infantry game and not just lose it slowly. Rod of Corruption and Liber Babonicus are always good any matchup, anytime. So if you take Skrulk and you're not taking them, don't take Skrulk. Now we're going to get back to Deathmaster Snitch, and I think he is the best lord, and I think he's underutilized, and I'm going to show you why. So to start, he's very good. He has armor sundering on his damage, he has scaling damage, so the lower something is, the better he does. He has a very nice aura of -9 melee defense, and World Weeping Blades can be nice if he gets surrounded by Cav or something, but I'm about to show you something that I think is why he is extremely underutilized. Now we're also going to bring the Warlock Engineer for a different reason, because we'll talk about heroes next, but I'm going to use him for this. There's a common mistake, in my opinion, that Skaven players do, and it's taking the Warlock Engineer and insisting on using his Mortis Engine. I do think his Mortis Engine can be helpful, but I only think it's helpful sometimes, and I need to point out why. So I'm going to run him into Berserkers. Now the reason I think, say, his Mortis Engine is only sometimes useful is in matchups like the Vampire Counts, or let's say Bretonnia or something. Maybe he can be useful because he's good at sitting in low tier infantry and just draining them down. But he's relatively expensive for a Mortis Engine, and if he faces anybody even remotely elite, he will die too quickly, even when surrounded by slaves, to be that useful. Here we have Berserkers, 750 gold unit, fairly offensive. Good for them. They're going to fight the Warlock Engineer, but you can see he only has 32 melee defense, and on the charge he already takes a massive amount of damage, and now he's surrounded by these Marauder Berserkers, and they're going to chop him to pieces. So that's just a little forewarning about the Warlock Engineer and his Mortis Engine. Be careful with it. Now, why did we load into a game to talk about Snitch and then focus on a Warlock Engineer? Well, I needed him to die first. So, moving on. Now we need to get spotted. Alright, we have gotten spotted, and now I need to play a little bit of Ring Around the Rosie for a second to prove what I'm trying to prove here. I need those Berserkers to come back in. Okay. So one of Snick's most underutilized tools is his Deathmaster's Sigil. And the reason I say that is, yes, it's a good snare, but it is also a very potent explosion. It does damage. I don't see enough people utilizing that. You need to use the snare. If the enemy lord is in a pile of infantry, snare him. It's free damage, 90-second cooldown, no winds of magic. It's fine. It's got a decently long range. It's very good. You can see with just the Deathmaster Sigil and one attack, I got about 400 value. Alright? It's a little known thing about Snitch. It's very useful. Especially if their lord is trying to hide in a bunch of chaff, save your snare for, you know, dealing damage. It's especially good against infantry. I don't know how effective it is versus cavalry. I haven't noticed it being very good. But, you know, if we have Bretonnia and Fey Enchantress is trying to just escape through some peasants, slap that down, do half the peasants' damage right away, they'll flee. So, little known fun fact about Snitch. On to heroes. Heroes. I think the Pack Masters are overrated, because if you want to take them, you're only going to take them on their Brood Horror, right? Running with the Pack. This is a 150 gold ability, roughly. You restore 4 health per second. It just gives everything around it regen. It sounds more useful than it is, in my opinion, because Pack Masters especially are janky. Their attack animations are very duck and weave, dive and dodge, so a lot of the time, the game doesn't really register them as in combat. So I've noticed that a lot of the time this isn't proccing, and even when it is proccing, I mean, you're just giving some AoE regen to Molder monsters specifically, which if you're with Wolf Rats, they need to shock and run. They're never going to stay in sustained combat, so they're not going to get a lot of this regen. And Rat Ogres, it's mildly useful, but normally Rat Ogres lose models very quickly rather than health. Either down to gunfire or shock cav or something like that. Rat Ogres aren't going to survive long enough to use that regen either. So I would cut it if you're going to take a Packmaster, but I think they are extremely limited use. Scrying Stone is almost always good on any character to get it on. 78 gold, and it gives you 8 leadership, which is what you really want it for. The damage resistance is nice. Never take Skaven Brew, it sucks. Never take Skaven Brew. It's not a terrible ability, it's just 150 gold for an okay ability. Shock Collar is a must if you take a Packmaster, otherwise why are you taking them? So the only time I use Packmasters is when you're running around with a bunch of Wolf Rats and they need a leadership component that can stick with them. That is pretty much the only time they're useful. They're not very good duelists with monsters because they have 40 melee attack, 30 melee defense, and no bonus versus large. That's a common misconception. They're actually terrible at fighting other monsters. So they're very niche. I don't think they're very good. Chieftains, I like in a rare case. Now, the problem with Chieftains that really sucks is their leadership is only 50. They are extremely cowardly, even by Skaven standards. So if you do take them, a Bonebreaker's nice. They can do some good work there. But if you take them on foot, get rid of Power Grab. Get rid of Power Grab, because the odds that your Lord is going to die before this idiot runs away are so low, it's not worth the 100 gold. It's not. The buff would be nice, but that's only if you're going to throw your Lord away. And your Lord is... This sounds stupid to say out loud, but like your Lord is your most important piece, especially in a Skaven army. So if you... Spending 100 gold for that kind of insurance policy is like, if I lose the game, I won't lose as bad. And it's like, yeah, but you're going to lose, so don't bet on losing. Do take Guardian, it's good. And then always take Shield of Distraction. Especially, sometimes I like to pair him with Skrulk and just have this on foot, Guardian, melee attack debuff around Skrulk, because Skrulk, as we saw earlier, has his own -5 that's different, so it stacks. So -10 melee attack aura is nice. Otherwise, Chieftain on Bonebreaker can kind of serve as a very expensive paladin. Ashen Sorcerer, you can take him for the memes, but if you do take him at all, pretty much you only want to take him for the Warp Stars and get rid of everything else. Maybe Skitter Leap if you have some invisible cheese, but mostly the Warp Stars. The problem with the Ashen Sorcerer is that his Lore of Magic is good on a roster with 2 better ones. That's mainly his issue. He has some decent scrolls, but he's just not worth it, unfortunately. Plague Priest, very good. Almost always want to take it on a Plague Furnace unless you're SEM'd capped. And same as Skrulk, you have 2 situations. You'll either take Vermintide and Pestilent Breath or Vermintide and Pestilent Birth, depending on the same situations we discussed earlier. Again, always take Scrying Stone. Never take this. This sucks. It's just 67 gold for, 6% charge speed. Whatever. And it's disabled if engaged in melee. Yeah, that's extra garbage. But on top of his Plague Furnace, he is a Mortis Engine, so he's very good. Now, common misconception I forgot earlier, the Grey Seer on the Screaming Bell, not a Mortis Engine. Plague Priest, he is. Good. Warlock Engineer, why take him? Pretty much because you want Howling Warp Gale and your caster is not Ruin. That's the only reason to take him. Warpstone Armor otherwise was mentioned. This extra powder is okay if you have a gun-focused build, but I don't know. It's just not worth it. It's not worth bringing him, taking up a hero slot just for that. If you ever have the space, assassins are almost never bad. 60 melee attack is nice. 35 melee defense does suck, but they're kind of small targets to hit, so sometimes they get some pseudo melee defense just from being tiny. And Rival Hide Talisman is great. Never pair it with your Assassin's Trophy. Nothing on this planet has 64 melee attack that's worth doing that. Just take it down. Start with the Assassin's Trophy, since it goes on cooldown. Then follow up with Rival Hide, because you only get to use it once. And then hopefully, at that point, your Assassin's Trophy with 6-second cooldown will be halfway off cooldown. So, in 2 minutes, 120 seconds time, you could have 90 seconds of that be a debuff if you time it right. And Slippery is, in my opinion, generally good. Quick thing on that is its duration is 25 seconds, its cooldown is 60, so about a third of the time this bad boy could have 60 melee defense, which is much better. But assassins, very, very good. Almost always do their job. Oh, quick note about concealment bombs. I found this out relatively recently. They do not activate right away. For some reason that I can't explain why, you pop concealment bombs and you have like a 3 or 4 second delay before you actually go invisible. You do need to be careful about that. Infantry. Since the nerf, I don't think all Skaven Slave front lines are almost ever worth it. You usually want a good mix. Spears are almost always better than regular because of their increased melee defense. You can see it's 6 more melee defense. Now, Clan Rats have better stats than almost everything else, but it doesn't matter because they're going from garbage to still garbage, so who cares? The reason you want to get Clan Rats over Skaven Slaves is just some of the leadership, but a mix is usually preferable in my opinion. But unlike a lot of factions, you want to do infantry last because you're just trying to fill out your roster. They're never really carries. The shielded variants, in my opinion, usually aren't worth it because if archers are wasting their time shooting your Clan Rats, they're going to lose the game. Archers are going to focus on your Rat Ogres or your weapons teams. They're never going to shoot your Clan Rats. Or like I said, if they are, things have already gone terribly wrong for them. Clan Vulcan Tail Slashers are good if you're fighting something with fire weakness. I don't know. They're good against like trolls and stuff. Even though they don't have anti-large, the fire damage usually works out pretty well. Good versus Tomb Kings. Warp Grinders, it's sometimes nice to have maybe one in your army and keep it in the back line if you're doing a weapons team build, just to lock down any cav that come. But they do require intense micro, so maybe not the best in matchups where you have like a ton of things you need to focus on. Eshin Triads, in large part, are terrible. Plague Monks, in large part, are also terrible. Their stats just really don't make up for what they lack. 28, 25, 32 with some anti-infantry. It's like, okay, but you don't really have armor piercing, so if the infantry are worth half a damn, they're going to kill you. And if they're garbage, well, okay, but usually Skaven bring like Poison Wind and shit, so you're going to be nuking your own Plague Monks accidentally while they're beating up some garbage infantry. I don't really get it. And the only faction, like, let's say Britannia, okay? Plague Monks could slap around the peasants all day. Cool, but Britannia's not counting on the peasants to win. You know, they want their heavy cav to do the work, they want their archers to do the work, and the Plague Monks can't deal with either of those. So Plague Monks, and you're going to notice this might be a reoccurring theme, is that Plague Monks are just going to do what the Skaven roster is already proficient at doing, and that's clearing out low-tier infantry. You don't need them. Death Runners are situationally really good. If your enemy has an artillery build that for some reason you don't want to duel, Death Runners can sneak in pretty effectively with their concealment bombs and delete weapons teams in startlingly fast times, like faster than you would think is possible. So they can be good. Plague One Sensor Bearers have very few applications, but they can be good there. Their magic damage is good, and their -10 leadership on melee attack is also quite good. They have Frenzy. The ROR version has ITP and Aura, and I feel like that could be good, but I've had a hard time ever making it work, so user beware. Storm Vermin Halberds and Storm Vermin Sword and Shield, limited use. Sometimes Storm Vermin with Halberds are good in the greenskin matchup, deal with Stone Trolls, but they're risky, because even with their 90 armor, archers take them out like super easily. Sword and Boards are unique. I do enjoy them. I enjoy them a lot because they're shitty elite infantry, but they are still elite infantry. And they have a high model count that I think is undervalued a lot. Let's find something elite. Hargoneth Executioners. 75 models, right? Blackguard, 75 models. Sure, cool. Let's go to Dwarves. Where are your Hammerers? Hammerers, there you are. 75 models, right. So elite infantry normally has 75 models. Storm Vermin have 120. And this gives them a large health pool. And sure, their stats are kind of bad, but if you have 120 of these guys swinging at you, you have, almost double the attack speed of a 75 model unit because you have twice as many Storm Vermin swinging. That, and usually matchups like Dark Elves and Bretonnia or something. Bretonnia never do this because of the cav element, but let's just stick with it for a second. If for some reason you're not going to bring Poison Wind, maybe Dark Elves, it can be nice to have 1 or 2 Storm Vermin on your front line to just win and surprise them. Because they're going to bring Bleak Swords and Dread Spears, just crap. And your Stormbringer could probably kill all of them on their own, and then late game you actually have some decent leadership infantry hanging around. So it can sometimes be a fun surprise pick, though you have to be very careful when you use it. The Council Guard. Some people are going to argue with me on this, but I think the Council Guard are largely a trap. They are 1,300 gold. That's quite expensive, and they're not a bad unit. I just think they're a little overused. They have a hard time connecting in melee. They don't do a lot of damage. They do have Guardian, which is neat, but a lot of what threatens Skaven Lords is like Overcasted Fireball, Overcasted Soul Quench, Spirit Leech, and stuff like that, and their physical resist won't really help. That and Burning Head is so prevalent in the meta, Sea Fang, those kind of things. Like, I find the Council Guard just get murdered and don't really get their value back. Now, in some matchups, they can be good. I just don't think in every matchup. Bretonia, they're fine. Fey Enchantress is going to drain them down, but you should hopefully deal with her anyway. Now, something we mentioned earlier, Deathmaster Snitch has a nice snare that's also a bomb. If you want to trap a Horse Lord in the middle of the Council Guard, don't fucking bomb them. Snare the Lord outside of them and then walk them over. I know it's annoying, but don't kill your Council Guard. On to Slingers. Skaven Slave Slingers, very nice if you can fit them in. They pay for themselves very quickly. They're nice against Chaos Spawn especially, so bring them a couple in the Beastman matchup's usually good. Night Runners are decent skirmish combatants, but they'll lose to almost any other skirmisher. So you usually want to take them in an area where no one's going to skirmish with you. They're good into vampire counts. Decent against like Tomb Kings and stuff, but they're weak-ish skirmishers. You only want to take them when you're going to for sure win. Night Runners with Slings. Rarely useful, but good at what they do when they do it. Oh, we'll come back to you. Warp Fire Throwers, I wish they were good. They're not. Gutter Runners with Slings. Just get Night Runners with Slingers. They're better. Gutter Runners without Poison. Don't do it. Just get Poison ones. Usually a nice skirmish core is 2 of these paired with 1 of those for the Poison and the better melee stats if you get jumped on by dogs. If you do get jumped on by dogs, if you're like 2 dogs to 2 Night Runners and a Gutter Runner, just melee fight them. Just push them off of you. It's better than trying to run away, because then you'll get attacked in the rear and you'll break quicker. This, you can actually fight off dogs. Now, if there's 3 dogs and 3 of you, you're going to lose and you need help. That handles skirmish stuff. Sorry, I got distracted for a moment there. Yes, on to the fun bits. Deathglow Bombardiers, pretty much never use them. The Avalanche Mortars and Poison Wind Mortars. They serve 2 very different purposes, even though one's the ROR of the other. Avalanche Mortars do a ton of shock damage, and they'll do pretty good work against any multi-entity model, probably above 20. Don't shoot them at like trolls. But they are good. I think they were super broken in the pre-release of the Shadow and the Blade, and then they got nerfed, and people kind of ignored them, but I'm actually enjoying them a lot, especially versus Archer factions, because Archers usually don't have the best leadership. They can't just take that much damage to the face and recover. Poison Wind Mortars, generally good versus almost anything, but they're Poison Wind cousins. You can get 2 of them for every 1 mortar, and they'll throw more globes, and they're generally better. So why take the mortars? Well, the mortars is if you really want to punish skirmish cav, if you really want to punish people on the advance, and if you really want to punish archers. Because Poison Wind globes can theoretically hit archers, right? Let's say Quarrelers. Quarrelers have good range, but whatever. 160 range. Poison Wind globes have 85. And Quarrelers are very long range, but whatever. Sticking with that example, let's pretend even if these globes had the same range as archers, right? Archers are going to be behind their front line, past your front line, and shooting either at your front line or at your Rat Ogres whenever your Rat Ogres try to countercharge Cav. So your Poison Wind Globes would have to walk past your front line to get to the archers. So that's never going to happen. Poison Wind Globes can almost never threaten archers. So Poison Wind Globes are almost only for dealing with Cav and melee infantry, The poison wind mortars are dealing for archers, skirmish cav, sometimes artillery, but that's a terrible use for them, so never mind that. Don't use them against artillery. So that's the two different uses. If your threat in the game is an infantry rush, you need more of these. If your threat in the game is archers or cav, you need more of these. And these can kind of deal with shot cav okay, but these are generally good. A nice combination, if you're worried about both, is 1 and 1. Trust me, it's worth it. Because the poison wind will usually keep going past one cast, so if you're good with your micro, you can throw it at the left side of your formation, throw it the right side, throw it the left, throw it the right, and 1 can do the job of 2. Goody. On to Rattling guns. I love Rattling guns. I love them. They're janky and kind of terrible. They're good against flying units and large targets, of which I'm trying to think that a Warp Lightning Cannon wouldn't deal with it almost better. But I almost never take the original Rattling guns. If you're going to take anything, take the Teeth Breakers. Why? Because they have concealment bombs, so they can be safe from enemy artillery. They have a faster reload time that just makes them really good. More accuracy, just better. The triple chevrons really does a lot for them, and they are actually pretty good. You want to pop concealment bombs almost at the start of the match and figure out what your opponent's doing, figure out how to position them just so they don't get sniped out. Or if you're not super worried about them just dying to cannons and shit right away, you can pop the concealment bombs later and then walk outside your formation and surprise some skirmish cav, though you do have to be very careful about that. There have been many times that I walked them to their death. But they can be nice for that. Giselles. Giselles are very good. They're very good. If you're not sure whether you need artillery or whether you need sheer stopping power against lords, they're a good compromise for if you don't really know what you're getting into. Good mid-range fighters. They're really terrible at countering enemy artillery or long-ranged assets. If they can get in range, they'll do good work, but that's, if there's one cannon to one Giselle and you have to walk at the cannon while shooting it the whole time, the Giselle's going to lose. So, usually good against skirmish cav, decent against cav rushes, but I've noticed they don't get enough firepower out in time before the front lines clash, and the game's won or lost at that point. So there's weapons teams. I'm going to flip to artillery quick, skip the monsters because we're kind of on the missile front. So our Rattling Gunners can definitely deal with big monsters, and Giselles kind of can, but also can kind of deal with artillery. These two will win any artillery fight if you put them in the right situation. So, for artillery battles that have low leadership and high infantry counts, you want the Plague Claw Catapult. And by that, I mean if you're fighting the Empire. As I babble nonsense, I will just load into the game and show you what I mean. Do we have a Lord? Trash. Great. So, Warp Lightning Cannons, people would assume they'd be good because they have a more direct line of fire and they can take down war machines. That's actually usually not the case. Usually the Plague Claw Catapult is better because of all these clustered little unarmored infantry. Whereas the Warp Lightning Cannon has a really hard time hitting these low-profile cannons. The bolts will tend to just go right over them or not do enough damage. The catapults themselves will actually trade very effectively with the crew, rout them off and shatter them, effectively shutting down the cannons. That's volley 2 and volley 3. They did rally a little bit because Volkar's there. There we go, 4. You can see as soon as they got off the cannon, their damage spiked, and that's because the crew has actually been taking way more work than the cannon itself. And you can see here that they have now shattered, and your Plague Claw Catapult is perfectly fine. But that works versus Vampire Coast to a degree, that works versus Empire, that works versus Bretonnia. So if you have a lot of dudes standing around with low leadership and low armor, Plague Claw Catapults are great. Warp Lightning Cannons are great versus, well, dwarves, but that's not usually the strategy you want to take versus dwarves. Versus High Elves and Dark Elves. They're stupid Eagle Claw bolt throwers. Their people stand so far apart, it is really hard to hit them with the catapults. For them, if you want to win the artillery duel, you need Warp Lightning Cannons. Warp Lightning Cannons are also very good at taking out large targets. Warp Lightning Cannons are very good at taking out cavalry, Plague Claws actually are also not slouches against cavalry, and they're good against archers and infantry. So, again, we come back to the poison wind question that I had earlier, but if you're scared of the archers and infantry, Plague Claw. If you're scared of monsters and cav, Orb Lightning. Plague Claw does okay against cav, Orb Lightning does okay against archers, but it's neither of their favorite times. Doom Flayers, terrible. Never take them. Never take them. Until they get a super big buff or something, they're just worthless. And I talked this on stream a couple times, so I'll keep it super short. They lose to most infantry. They take a surprising amount of damage from archers. They lose to cavalry. They don't clear out the infantry. They do hit quickly enough. And that's like, it's not immediately disqualifying, right? You know, there's, oh, but they're a chariot. They do chariot things. But on this roster, you could get It could Zap Zap, the Warp Lightning Cannon ROR for the same cost as one freaking Doom Flayer. You get a Rat Ogre and 2.5 Skaven Slaves for that. The Doom Flayer's definitely not better than them. You get the ROR Rat Ogres for less than a Doom Flayer. Like, it's comparative cost is what makes them bad. So just don't take them. They're just not worth your time. Unless you're trying to meme, then meme. Doom Wheel, if you're going to take a Doom Wheel, you might as well take the Wheels of Doom. You can see the missile strength goes from 79 to 230. Melee attack, melee defense go up, leadership goes up. It's just better, and for 250 more gold, it's definitely worth it. So if you're going to take a Doom Wheel and you're not taking the Wheels of Doom, you're crazy. Doom Wheels, where are they useful? Not where you would think. They're terrible against Beastmen, as Centaurs with throwing axes can do a ton of damage to them. And Centaurs with throwing axes are decently common. So they're tricky. I found some success with them in Vampire Count matchups. I found some success with them in Archer-heavy builds. So sometimes against like High Elves, if they're going to take a bunch of Archers, that kind of thing. But they're super weak to Cav, so Doom Wheels are fragile. They're a fragile carry. You wouldn't think it, but they really are. I mean, they only have 4,000 health for a large single entity, and they can break and run, and then they're not that fast. So they're tricky, but if you can run them around, they're quite good, especially with that missile strength, just shooting randomly at your foes. But I really only take them in 1 or 2 matchups. Probably just Vampire Counts, and that's probably it, actually. Maybe greenskins. There might be a greenskin tech there I don't know about. Alright, last but not least, monsters. If you're going to take Wolf Rats, they need friends. They can't run alone very well. They just don't function well. So they either need a Packmaster to run with them if you're going to use them offensively. If you're going to use them defensively, running in and out of your line, pair one with a Rat Ogre, pair another with another Rat Ogre. That way the Rat Ogres can run up and do some major damage and give leadership to the Wolf Rats that are poisoning and dragging things into the dirt. Rat Ogres themselves usually want at least 2 in any matchup, but sometimes 4 is not a bad idea. You don't want to fight. There's almost no cavalry in the game you want to fight with Rat Ogres straight up. You usually want to let the cavalry charge into your Wolf Rats or your Skaven Slaves and then countercharge them with the Rat Ogres. They'll do pretty well. Rat Ogres are surprisingly terrible at surrounding either a Lord or a monster and doing a lot of damage. So just use them as roadblocks in that sense. I've made the mistake too many times of surrounding Volkmar the Grim with 3 Rat Ogre units, and they're all just beating him to death, but his health doesn't go anywhere. I mean, they do have melee attack and melee defense of 26, and they don't have any bonus versus large or anything, so they're surprisingly bad at that. But they can take on Cav okay. Brood Horrors. After the nerfs, they're largely bad, but they can be useful as a mobile regen terror piece. So they're mostly, it's weird to say, but they're a support unit. They're not really a carry. So you'll run them after casters or something if they're left out of position, like their front line and Cav all left them abandoned. You can run a Brood Horror after them, but 1,200 gold is an awful lot to give for support. I don't know. Brood Horrors aren't very good. Morskatars Hellion, I used to love it a lot, but I had a hard time winning with it. It's mostly just that it's so expensive and it's really hard to heal. The only healing you can really get is with Thrott's Remoldered ability, which I guess we didn't talk about Thrott too much, but Thrott's just good at monster support, and monsters aren't super strong for Skaven right now as a win condition, so I don't really like him very much. He's also pretty bad at dueling large monsters. Considering his kit, you'd think he'd be better at it. Anyway, so Morskatars has a hard time staying alive. It's very expensive, and with only 4,000 health and 30 armor, it is extremely susceptible to even basic archers. So Mousquetaires, it's sometimes a niche fun pick, but largely hard to pull off. Now, Hell Pit Abominations are weird. They're very, very weird. They have horrifically low splash damage, so they can't clear out hordes of infantry to save their life. They're actually pretty bad duelists, as they easily get distracted by infantry, and even one-on-one, they're just not that great at it. So the only actual time that Hell Pit Abomination is going to be a good damage dealer is if a dragon lands right next to you with no infantry support around, you have infantry support, and it sits there and fights your Hell Pit. If all that is true, your Hell Pit will pay for itself. So why do some builds have 2 of them, or 1? Well, they're tanky. They're distracting, because your opponent wants to shoot the very large thing in the middle of your army. They 2 cause terror, which is good. And, I mean, they only have 50 armor. They have 15% missile resist, but they are pretty weak to missiles. So largely, they're just a terror piece. They have Too Horrible to Die that'll usually proc and cause them to get some health back and stay alive. But Hell Pits, they're tricky. They're tricky. I only really take them in the Beastmen matchup, just because the Beastmen have such low leadership that usually the double Hell Pits can run around and terror route everything off, and they have a hard time killing it unless they take mass archers. Can. Let's see. Would I take it anywhere else? It could maybe be... No, it's terrible against greenskins. It's terrible against greenskins because stone trolls will just surround it and beat it up. Do a ton of damage to it. Norska... I've heard people say it's good, but honestly I've found Skin Wolves trade very effectively against Hell Pit Abominations because they're low armored large targets. And you can afford 2 Skin Wolves for 1 Hell Pit, so I don't know about that. Wolf Rats just perform better at taking out Skin Wolves. It's really take them in the Beastmen matchups, but if you need something tanky to distract your enemy for a bit, Hell Pit. With that being said, I guess a quick overview on what we talked about. Always want to fill in your army with Skaven slaves. If you can get 8 of them, that's pretty good. You want to trade out a couple for clan rats. But you usually want about a 2-to-1 or 3-to-1 ratio on what you're defending. So if you have 2, 3, 4 Jezzails, Rattling Gunner, Poison Wind, Poison, Poison, it gets Zap Zap. Good luck defending that, because the most you can get is 9 infantry and a lord. You know what I mean? Sorry, 10 infantry and a lord. So you got to keep the ratio a little better. Now the problem that comes with the opposite of that is, let's say you just have 1 Poison Wind Mortar and you're going to have a million clan rats between you and the enemy and you're just going to slowly grind them down. Well, 1 summon or 1 spell can take out that Poison Wind Mortar and you're out of threats. So you got to play this delicate balance of having too many threats to shut down, but having low enough threats to protect. And that's kind of the Skaven juggling act, isn't it? As for formations, you will usually want to do something like this. Quick. Oh, shit. Do you not have a lord? Oh, you have too much money. Go away. Give me just lord. The last thing we'll talk about is formations. Formations. I used to do a lot of Skaven boxes. I've found that that is just too weak of a playstyle, actually, and recently I've been having a little bit more success with staggered rows. So you leave a little bit of space between the front line and then throw a back line behind them. And if you have Poison Wind Globes, they would go either here or here and here. So why have these staggered rows? Well, a Burning Head's going to probably come through and try to take out some things, so you don't want your rows in the same latitude, I guess I'll call it. Otherwise, they're all going to get hit. And you want them tight, but not too tight like this, so that if your enemy tries to path through here, they'll still run into some resistance, and they'll be surrounded on both sides. But most likely, they're going to get trapped up on the first line of clan rats. These guys are all going to break, and then you can run up these ones to fill the position. As with Skaven, it's never holding the front line, it's losing gracefully. So you just want to lose as slowly as possible. Put some guys on the flanks to deter cavalry, and you'll have rat ogres as well. You put all your nice shiny toys in here. and you should be good to go. Now, when to summon? It's been said on Turin's stream a lot, and he is right, that you either want to summon, a lot of good Skaven players will summon before the battle. So you'll run up, put your Plaguecaster like right here, and then summon when your enemy hits about like this point. And that way, you just throw a big old red X right there, and either they have to all stop and deal with that one troop as you're just bombing them with poison and shit, or what's more likely going to happen is they're going to stagger their advance, come around while the center gets stuck here. You can bomb both of these positions, and then by the time these ones are routing off and heading away from you, then the center will finally get its shit together and come back, and you'll be able to focus on it. That's the ideal. It's hard, it's hard to pull off. Skaven are a decently hard faction to play. I think they're fun. But the other time to use the summon is after all these idiots are dead. And you almost never, and I make this mistake all the time, but every time I do, I'm like, son of a bitch, I did it again, is you never want to summon stuff to help a fight that's already happening. It's a horrific waste of time, and I do it way too much because you're like, oh, well, I have clan rats of spears and clan rats of spears surrounding these high elves. I can summon a third clan rat on top of them and just swarm them with bodies, but it's like, they don't do anything. They really suck in melee combat, and you're wasting Winds of Magic, and more importantly, you're wasting the cooldown. And if I summon, let's say I have like a high elf unit right here just taking a lot of work, and I want to summon an extra clan rat, I'm like, yay, I summoned an extra clan rat. Good for me, I did great. Well, what happens if this breaks, and then you have like Norskins coming through here, getting into all your stuff, and it's bad? Well, then that clan rat's here. It's already probably half done with its timer, so it's going to disintegrate soon by the time you can even pull it back. And your cooldown for Vermintide, I forget what the exact number is, but it's going to be a while. It's not the quickest spell in the game. So it's important to either summon before the battle starts or after one of your frontline units loses. It's there to plug holes. It's there to distract. It's not there to help you win anything, if that makes sense. Just treat them as walls. Don't treat them as troops, I guess I would say. You're just summoning walls. So, trying to think of how to end the video. I guess a fun... Oh, okay, I know. I remember something I was going to talk about real quick. What to ban? So you're first picking Skaven, right? You're first picking Skaven. What are you going to do? Ban what else? They're shitty. They're shitty, awful things to fight. Why are they shitty, awful? Because they have two ways to play the game. Both of them are very good against you. And it's on you, the Skaven player, to predict them 100% correctly, or you lose. If they're going to kite you with Deepwood Scouts, you need Jezzails, you need Poison Wind Mortars, you need to outshoot them. If they're going to full cav rush you with vanguarding these assholes and some Wild Riders and some Blade Riders with spears, you need a Molder Blob. You need 4 Rat Ogres, you need some dogs, you need Hell Pit Abominations, you need Throt. But if you bring Throt and all the Hell Pit Abominations, the Rat Ogres, and all that other crap, the kite build is going to destroy you. And if you go with the full gun build, the rush is going to destroy you. And you might be like, well, that just sounds 50-50. Why is this a bad matchup? Well, the elves don't have to guess your build correctly to beat you. Because if they go full kite and you go full shooting at them, it's tough for them, but they can win it. And if they go full kite, the rush example's easier. If they go full rush and you kind of half-ass it, you're like, oh, I have a couple Rat Ogres and some spears and some Storm Vermin, but I still want some shooting elements. You're going to lose. They're going to just be better at it than you, and they're going to break through your lines and crush you. So the onus is on you to win, and that's what sucks. It's just, it's a bad matchup. Ban it. The other one to ban, in my opinion, is Warriors of Chaos. Because Warriors of Chaos, Norska, and Beastmen all are going to do the exact same thing to you. Rush you with some Manticores, some monsters, some elite infantry. They're going to slam into your line as quickly as possible. They're going to try to break through. The difference between these three factions is that Beastmen and Norskins have low leadership, and you can kind of try to spook them off. It's hard. They're hard matchups, but you can do it. Warriors of Chaos are unbreakable bastards, and they will keep coming, and they will keep coming till you're all dead. It's rough. So I banned them. If you learn the Beastmen-Norskin matchup, it can be pretty fine. There's one particularly potent Norskin build out there, but I won't sell myself out with that one. But anyway. So, what are you going to run into if you first pick Skaven and you ban those two things? Vampire counts, Beastmen, Norska. Maybe Tomb Kings. Alright, those four. Tomb Kings, what do you do about it? You need a monster... You need a monster shoot team. Skaven, where are you? Monster shoot team. Let's go with 5. I have multiple builds. The thing is you always want multiple iterations with the same idea, the same win condition, but you want to mix up what you're doing so they can't get directly countered. You know, like if they know your exact build, they know how you play, they're going to beat you, but you can switch up things while keeping the same core rules intact. So Tomb Kings, what are they going to bring against you? I'll just put them up here. They're going to bring a bunch of chariots. They're going to bring Cetra on a giant kitty, and they're going to try to rush you. For that, you have the Teeth Breakers, these 4 Rat Ogres, and Skrulk. Liber Bubonicus, their Lord, or their Necrotect or something, but Tomb Kings have shitty healing options, so Liber Bubonicus is really good. Double Assassin is fine. Double War Lightning Cannon, fine. Chaff all around. Why don't I have Poison Wind? Because for once in this game's history, my infantry are better than theirs, so I don't want to Poison Wind them because I'm actually killing better units of mine. It's not worth it. This build's good. Now, the opposite is if Tomb Kings go Double Bone Giant or a bunch of Ushabti, the Double Warp Lightning Cannons will actually do surprisingly well against them. The Teeth Breakers can Concealment Bomb and walk up and trade well against the Ushabti. And you do have a good rush that can break through their front line with some Rat Ogres, and it's pretty good. Now, the matchup still isn't favored for you, but it's roughly 50-50 with a build like this. So the point is to bring good shooting and bring good stopping power. Shit infantry because it's fine. But you don't need Poison Wind in this matchup. It actually hurts you more than them. On to the vampire counts. I have a lot of builds and I have a lot of thoughts about this, but one that's been working for me recently... Well, maybe I shouldn't give that away just yet. But the main key... I'll use this one because it's outdated, but it gets across the point. The main key to dealing with the vampire counts is they're going to summon on top of you. So if you bring Poison Wind, you need to bring 2. You need to keep them separate. Otherwise, they're getting a zombie to the face, and neither of them's going to throw for a while. Kite tools are good here because you can usually kite out most things, and the vampire counts can't really counter kite. Obviously, they don't have any ranged. So kiting options are good. I would bring more gutter runners than just 1. Maybe 2 with poison and a couple night runners is good. Rat Ogres are kind of shit. Brood Horrors are kind of shit. This is an old build, but I didn't want to give away my new one, as it is brand new, and I would like to get a few more wins with it before I give it away. Deathmaster, very good in this matchup. Use the Deathmaster Sigil Bomb we talked about to nuke some Graveguard or zombies that they're standing in. Cloak of Shadows is very good for the melee defense aura. Whirl of Weeping Blades, situationally good. Assassin with Rival Hide, very good. This build is old. I should have that. And a Plague Priest on a Furnace is almost always good. It's a really good Mortis engine. Does a lot of damage to things around it. It's relatively tanky. For the spells, I would usually take this combination. Vermintide, Pestilent, Breath. Vermintide is tough. If you try to summon zombies, summon these clan rats straight into zombies, they're going to break immediately and suck. But if you deploy them on the outer edges of things and then charge them in, they usually won't immediately rout. Pestilent Breath is very good against ghost units. Don't overcast it, as I've recently learned that it doesn't do any more damage, it just increases the poison duration, but who cares about that? It's not worth the overcast damage and the 3 extra mana. Just regular cast it. Alright, what do we got left? Norska and Beastmen. Norska and Beastmen, you largely want to focus on sniping their lords with either Warp Lightning Cannons in Norska's case, or Assassin and Double Hell Pit in the Beastmen case. But some skirmish elements can be good there, some elite infantry. Don't want to give away all my tricks just yet, but there are ways to play that. So if you're going to counterpick Skaven, who do you counterpick into? Counterpick Bretonnia, Counterpick Dwarves, obviously. Counterpick Empire. Some people like Lizardmen, I don't, so I'm the wrong person to talk to about that. So Bretonnia, Empire, and Dwarves are 3 solid things that if someone picks it before you and doesn't ban Skaven, pick Skaven. For Bretonnia, how do you beat them? Poison Wind. A lot of Poison Wind. Get a Mortar, get 2 of those globes. It's free money all day. They have nothing that is okay with being Poison Wind. It's very good. Deathmaster Snitch to deal with Fae Enchantress, you'll be fine. Dwarves, that's a longer conversation, but mostly just some Jezzails, Howling Morpgale to deal with Gyrocopters, Poison Wind, you'll be fine. Empire, we talked about it, but Plague Claws, very good against their artillery, so bring 1 or 2. And then if they don't bring artillery, if they're bringing a Cav Rush, the Plague Claws are still fine. They do okay against Huntsmen, they do okay against the Empire Knights. They're fine. Bring 2 Jezzails. If they bring Volkmar the Grim, it's going to be tricky. Try to surround him with Rat Ogres and then punish him with a bunch of Jezzail fire. But he is the hardest thing for the Skaven to take down in this roster. Everything else is pretty easy breezy, lemon breezy. I hope you enjoyed that video about Skaven, and I hope this helped. And if you're one of the people fighting me on Tisty Ladder and you're using this to beat me, rude. That's rude, dude. All right. Love you guys. See you later.